Mother, Mary Magdalene, Jesus, Buddha, and to all the holy names of God, to all saints and enlightened teachers, as well as their teachings, specifically the teachings of A Course in Miracles. We welcome you and we're so glad you're here. We are a social media friendly community. We invite you to check in on our Facebook platform, share our invites and events. And if you're watching our live stream on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We are a spiritual community with a global message, and we invite you to help share the message. If you received a reminder text today and you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, just copy, paste, and text them the invite. It's that easy. Everyone likes to be invited. It's so great to be here with you this morning. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is your second time, welcome back. Our hope is that you make this your spiritual home. Our spiritual community is a place to connect. We'd love to be able to recognize you by name. So if you're comfortable, please add your name on your Zoom profile. So what's happening this morning? Here's a summary of the gathering. Before we get to the talk and our community conversations, Mario D'Alessio will be sharing invitations and announcements, and then prayer and meditation. And then we have the talk, the community offering, and then the conversation. In this conversation, we encourage you not to leave your brains, your beliefs, or your background at the door. We don't have all the answers, but we love the questions. So now that you have a roadmap about the flow of our gathering, I'll pass it to Mari for our announcements.
Good day to all. We are a virtual community offering daily classes and events on Zoom to support your spiritual journey through the week. Some of the highlights that we invite you to participate in are as follow. Monday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. Central, you can join us for Sacred Movement Yoga, a gentle yoga practice to start your day balanced in body, mind, and spirit. On Wednesdays at 12:30 p.m. Central, you can join 12 Steps to Miracles. This is a support group for those who are or know someone they love who is struggling with any kind of addiction. We mix the principles of the 12 steps and A Course in Miracles. All are welcome, and you can join at any time on Wednesdays. We have a new offering coming up starting on Saturday, August 9th at 10 a.m. Central. You can join Dove Fishman and be grateful for your triggers, what our life upsets teach us. During this time together, we will look at the lessons our relationships teach us, the people who trigger us or who we see as different and avoid. We will apply the metaphysics of A Course in Miracles to reverse the cause and effect that make these relationships uncomfortable. So that is starting August the 9th at 10 a.m. Central. We have many other events coming up, guest speakers, just as Corinne Subko, Lisa Natoli coming up. So just keep an eye on our calendar of events. You will see it in the chat. All the information will be there, or you can always go to our website, SpeakEasySpiritualCommunity.com for that. And right now, I invite everybody to just settle in as we spend a little bit of time in prayer. So if you are able, I invite you to just close your eyes and settle in. And if you're not able to close your eyes right now, just put your focus in your heart as we sit together in this moment. And I speak a word of blessing for everyone that is here today, those who will listen later, for our community, and for everyone in the world, as I speak a word of peace, blessings to all, and ease and grace. I know this time together will be blessed, It'll be filled with aha moments that will keep bringing us closer to the light. And from A Course in Miracles, I would like to read the following prayer. This holy instant would I give to you. Be you in charge, for I would follow you, certain that your direction gives me peace. And if I need a word to help me, Holy Spirit will give it to me. If I need a thought, that Holy Spirit will also give. If I need but stillness and a tranquil, open mind, these are the gifts I will receive of him, of her. Holy Spirit is in charge by my request, and he, she will hear and answer me because she speaks for God, my Father, Mother, and his holy child. Let's just sit in here for a few moments. We're grateful and thankful for this time together as we welcome the words that Todd will offer to us. We're thankful for all the hands that make this service run smoothly and perfectly, and for the divine that guides each and every one of us. And together we say, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Maury. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Todd Fink. He is the host of the Kind Mind podcast and co-founder of the Giving Tree Band, an addictions counselor, mindfulness teacher, and motivational speaker. Todd is our guest speaker once a month, and you can find his bio and ways to connect with him in the chat. I now pass it to Todd Fink for our talk.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being together today. I wanted to share a message about grace. It was inspired from lesson 169 in A Course in Miracles. By grace I live, by grace I am released. That's been resonating with me recently because it changes things up in terms of what we ordinarily think about as the spiritual path, because it denies a merit-based salvation and instead affirms the unconditional benevolence of divine love. So it situates grace beyond reward, beyond a transaction, or beyond any product of effort, because it is a state of being. Still, it's a gift of God, or the ultimate reality. But if it's already ours, then what needs to happen is recognition. So it's not something acquired, as in it was not there at one time. It's always there, but we don't realize it. So it's something revealed when our mind is quiet and our heart is willing. Again, it's not learned, but it is described as a final step that must go beyond all our learning. Grace is acceptance of love, you could say. And that lesson goes on to say the acceptance of the love of God within a world of seeming hate and fear. That's another reason why I picked this concept out, grace, because it's transformative and revolutionary given the times that we're in and the tensions that we're struggling through, where it seems like fear, greed, and dogma are overwhelming all aspects of life. So is it possible that still the divine is right there with us through it all? Grace is uncaused by effort, unlike what we think about as learning about salvation as something you work for, you try to understand, you pray, you worship, you light candles, you chant, you sing, you sacrifice, and so on. This grace is not achieved by will, because will is of the mind and of the ego. So it's all about surrender. It's the undoing of our effort, and then a natural state remains when striving ceases. If we think about it somehow being a final bridge for a spiritual seeker realizing the truth or experiencing enlightenment, this is the moment then when God takes the last step, because our ego or mind can't do anything more. It's reminiscent of many mystical traditions where the ego's limits are the beginning of one no longer identifying as an ego or as a body, but feeling their eternal nature as soul consciousness. Grace can only be received, not understood. The mind that tries to grasp it will miss it or lose it. It's not a concept, but a true condition or true reality. So you don't have to spend too much time trying to define it, but more so trying to welcome it. Yet, nonetheless, I'll try to define it a little bit more or explain it a little bit more in my limited understanding. That message about grace, despite the world seemingly full of hate and fear, means it's the undoing of our own guilt and our own problem of time. So in grace, we can forgive ourselves, we can forgive others, because we remember something, that there was never anything to forgive. The whole structure of past and its error all dissolves. Grace operates outside of linear causality and collapses the illusion of guilt, an illusion because if the mistake or the errors from wrong perception, when we correct that perception, we can let go of the self-punishment or the desire to punish others. In much of Christian mysticism, grace is seen as unmerited divine favor. That's sola gratia, where we get the word gratitude. We've talked about this before, but then gratitude is used in the relative sense. Somebody does something nice for me, helps me out, gives me something. Even in common transactions, you pay for something, they give you the food, you say thanks or you say gracias. But in spirituality or in Christian mysticism, this goes beyond the relative sense. In theology, it's the idea that salvation isn't tied solely to faith and works, but is just simply given freely by God. And so there's many stories throughout scriptures or in the books of the Bible of instant revelation, right? Spontaneous conversion of Saul to Paul, which happens by God or the Holy Spirit. So this sort of flips everything on its head. St. John of the Cross wrote of a quote, living flame of love that comes through surrender. His passage includes the soul receives more in one moment of that silent love than it could gain through years of spiritual practice. Juliana of Norwich was born in the 1300s, and as a theologian and mystic, her writings are the oldest surviving in the English language by a woman. And her collection is known as Revelations of Divine Love, which includes notes about grace. One is grace is God's gift to us, not because we've done well, but because he loves us. And again, she says, between God and the soul, there is no between. So does this mean one shouldn't have spiritual practices or disciplines? I think that's probably overly simplistic. And the truth of grace then is paradoxical, like a Zen koan. Well, the more modern Indian sage of the 1900s, Ramana Maharshi, said, "Your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world. Grace is ever present. All that is necessary is that you surrender to it." So he indicates that there is some service in self-realization or enlightenment, which implies either giving one's effort or it's simply a way of orienting one's life. And to surrender to that may take effort to refine one's spiritual senses and make them fine enough to perceive and be open to receiving grace. In Sanskrit, the ancient language of spiritual India, one of the words for grace is anugraha. It's especially powerful in the context of Vedanta, which is one of the wisdom traditions. Anu is thought to be the first word, so a compound word of anu and graha. Ordinarily, anu means continuity or alignment, and graha is a word that is rooted in holding on to something, but it becomes like the household. And Gruhasta is a householder's life or a family's life because they're holding on to a family and holding each other together in an actual home that holds them. The causeless compassion of what's called Brahman, or the ultimate reality, manifests in Vedanta as the inner urge towards moksha, which is liberation. It's considered in Indian spirituality, like described in A Course in Miracles, as the final step beyond study, beyond practice, beyond effort, beyond study. One may do the sadhana, which is the word for a spiritual discipline, but anugraha is what awakens ultimately one to self-realization. The great sage Shankaracharya, who is the legendary reformer of Vedanta, or what's known as Advaita, which means non-duality, which is another way of saying oneness with God or the divine. He wrote, among all the means to liberation, the most important is the Lord's anugraha, for it alone removes ignorance completely. But what's amazing about Sanskrit is every word, even every syllable, has several translations or meanings. So if we look at some alternative meanings for anu, you'll find it's used to indicate the tiniest particle. Later, it was thought to mean the atom, but obviously Sanskrit precedes quantum physics. So it can be thought of as the subtlest essence. In Sanskrit philosophy, particularly what's known as Vaisheshika, it refers to whatever is the most indivisible thing, like the atom, or what we would have thought of as the atom. So in this case, the most refined essence of matter and time. Therefore, we could think of Anu as the soul, or that which is beyond any perception, or like a quantum perception because of how subtle it is. Therefore, micro penetration of divine awareness into the very atoms of experience, into the Anu of pure being, is where the Graha takes root as the abode. So while the usual interpretation of graha is to hold on to something or grasp something, if you're purely looking for the meaning of anugraha in Sanskrit, it could mean the subtle indwelling of grace. Grace then as a sacred homecoming, not in the physical sense, but as in the soul returning to its true nature, its true abode. Grahas also sometimes in astrology refers to the planets. So this influence of grace then could be all encompassing from the tiniest Planck length in quantum physics to the entire size of the universe, expressing the awesome and almighty and absolutely thorough power of grace. You may have heard of the book Autobiography of a Yogi. This was a transformative book in my life and in my spiritual journey. Yogananda's autobiography recounts the moment where he had his first enlightenment experience, or his experience of cosmic consciousness. And he describes it like this: while trying to meditate with his guru in the other room. Then he writes, the master struck me gently on the chest. My body became immovably rooted. Breath was drawn out of my lungs. My sense of identity was no longer narrowly confined to a body, but embraced the circumambient atoms. So that moment, it's clearly explained in the autobiography of Yogi that it was not the result of his effort. He goes on to describe how his consciousness streams out into the universe and he becomes merged with divine light. But it did come after he was young, but still, it came after years of devotion and readiness and self sacrifice. But it was his guru's touch, which was the transmission of grace, sometimes known in India as Shaktipat, that revealed the cosmic self beyond his mind and body or ego identification. Another great sage of the 20th century, Ramana Maharshi, widely regarded as somebody liberated while living in his body. He had this great awakening at age 16 with no formal guru or sadhana, which means a spiritual path. He was simply obsessed with dying and suffering existential anxiety, and lying down in terror of death, trying to act out what it would be like to be dead. He turned inward and realized something deathless, the deathless self. Yet later on, when asked about this, he would affirm to devotees that grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's the most important thing. Without it, no effort can succeed. So somehow, many of these saints and sages do not inflate the moment of grace, almost like it somehow dishonors what grace is, or that it was there all along. Like, I was so ignorant. I'm not going to give credit to myself or to that moment when I finally gave up my ignorance. So even in Ramana's seemingly spontaneous realization, he points to grace, not egoic insight, as the true cause. So the role of a guru then is not merely a teacher, but maybe a conduit of anugraha. And they're just mediators between God and the separate self, the part of consciousness that pretends or is attached to separation. And this final stage can happen by a touch, a look, a word. Grace flows seemingly through them, but not because of your effort, but because you at some point cease to block it. When Narendranath, who was became a great Indian philosopher, but prior to that, he was very scientific and rationalistic and skeptic. He visited his guru, the legendary Sri Ramakrishna in Calcutta, who was a devotee of Mother Kali and was a priest in a temple. But he was known to be highly realized. And Narendranath asked Ramakrishna, "Have you seen God?" And Ramakrishna replied, "Yes, I see him more clearly now than I see you." And Narendranath was very skeptical, and as an intelligent philosopher, he eventually became a monk, Swami Vivekananda, but continued to resist his guru and resist Ramakrishna's experience of ecstasy, divine ecstasy, until one day Ramakrishna merely touched him. And Vivekananda recounts in one of his books, the room, the furniture, the walls, everything whirled and vanished. I felt the whole universe was dissolving. I was terrified and shouted, "What are you doing to me?" That transmission shattered his ego-bound perception and began his lifelong path to awakening. So it wasn't his philosophy, it wasn't his effort, it was only the grace of this touch Then Swami Vivekananda became a world traveler and the first yogi to ever visit America in the late 1800s. He it was either the World's Fair in Chicago or that coincided with a Parliament of World Religions. Additionally, there was the bliss-filled mother, was what Anandamoy Ma was known as to people in India. She often awakened people without teaching anything or offering any techniques, simply through her touch or a glance or just sitting with her in silence. And she said, "I do nothing. The divine works through me. Grace flows where it is received." Now, I think this reflection is really interesting because it expresses grace in reverse, hinting at the uncaused nature captured by like the Latin gratia. By placing receipt of grace prior to its flowing, right? So this is a mystical way of capturing the paradox or koan of grace. How can grace flow where it is received? Wouldn't it be received where it's flowing? Anyways, effort and inquiry prepare our ground for this, but realization has to arrive unbidden, often through another, mediated through perhaps a guru, as grace. And many others describe an initial awakening from their guru and a final awakening. So people have stages of awakening, and they may have this primary guru who, like in Vivekananda's case, touches them, or in Yogananda's case, touches them. But then after Vivekananda has this experience of samadhi, he returns to ordinary consciousness. So it's not finished. But many others describe a final awakening from a stranger, a complete stranger, as in this reflection from Sri Nisargadatta, who's another 20th century ordinary man owning a tiny shop in Bombay, Mumbai. And in the back of the shop, he was communicating the highest truths to students who recognized his realization. But he describes he had a guru who just simply told him, find out who you are. And he did that with unrelenting effort. But then he reflected, after my guru's death, I wandered in a state of inwardness. He also had a family. He left this family for like a several month period of wandering when he thought he was just going to become a total renunciant. I was steeped in the I am as instructed. Then in a remote place, I met someone, a sadhu. Sadhu means an anonymous ascetic who's given up all identity and social conventions. What happened cannot be explained. It was like a spark, and suddenly I knew. And he's describing he knew forever. This also happened with Bodhidharma, the legendary Zen master, whose successor, Huike, spread Buddhism to China. He gave a transmission to a student, but then his student met a wandering saint in the mountains of China who finalized it. So often overlooked in these linear narratives of spiritual biographies, the unscripted arrival of final grace, which is often through a secondary figure, even a nameless or mysterious or untraceable one who delivers the last spark. This pattern recurs across all traditions, which makes it archetypal. Rarely becomes part of doctrines. Like in the case of Nisargadatta, you have to really dig to find that anecdote about the sadhu. He doesn't talk about it ordinarily, and in his main book, I'm that it doesn't come up, which again just shows how uninflated their realization is. And like even the name Buddha simply means awake, doesn't mean king, doesn't mean master, doesn't mean great one. Um, so perhaps that's precisely the point, that grace defies all these institutions and structures, ego, even our memory. Here's the layout of the archetype of the unknown catalyst. The seeker has a primary guru or teacher who provides the foundation, transmits teachings, a lineage, a path, or a religion, a life course, for example. And after intense inner work and surrender, and often after letting go of even the form of their guru, thirdly, a second anonymous figure appears, offering a simple gesture. It's usually just a moment with them too. And fourth, that moment seals the truth or seals their realization, doesn't usher in a new path, but it's the final um, surrender into God. And this realization is so humble that those who are realized often refuse to romanticize their own journey, their whole journey, and will say things like Ramana did. Nothing happened, he said. I simply realized I had always been what I am. And because of the nature of grace is that it doesn't need credit. The catalyst is often content to pass through the world unseen, like a breeze through a flame. Its work is as anonymous as nature is. The universal pattern then is a first fire, a long night, a second spark, and the true homecoming. In the I Ching, this is one of the oldest oracles, a scripture of divination from China. The 22nd hexagram, I won't go too much into what are hexagrams and all that. You can look it up if you're interested. But the 22nd prophecy is called Pi. It is the mountain over fire, which means stillness above, clarity below. And this is often translated as grace. The image of mountain over fire suggests a symbol for the mature seeker who has burned through illusion, represented by fire, and now rests in their presence. Mountain means presence because the mountain isn't distracted. It doesn't move around, it dart around anywhere. It's solid and solid for eons, relatively speaking. So mystics use a mountain for ultimate presence. This is the precondition for grace. Again, we already said grace arrives when the seeker is empty, still, and prepared, like a mountain, when striving yields to surrender. Grace, as it's described in the I Ching, means the description that I think is very poetic and beautiful, the adornment of the real. Richard Wilhelm was a preeminent Western translator of Asian spiritual texts, including the I Ching, and he describes hexagram 22 as the fire shines on the mountain and its light beautifies the stillness. He interprets P as grace arising from clarity, illuminating all of the necessary restraint, and adornment is the expression of spiritual nobility. We think of adornment as like wearing, jewelry or ornaments. The true grace is so simple, like the refined demeanor of a sage. Then it becomes the beauty of nature, unadorned. Nature is just automatically beautiful and decorated. It's decorated just by being itself. So grace is the expression of the truth in a form that can be perceived and loved by us. It's the inner light made visible. Or as Gibran wrote in The Prophet, work is love made visible. I want to come back to that word, anugraha. I was working on this word. My teacher taught me how to read and write Sanskrit back in 2005, 2006. And he has a unique way of deciphering the Sanskrit language. There is the classical way, and then there's the mystics way. So sometimes and I could not find this breakdown. I just thought how he might approach this. A is sometimes a prefix. And so it's interesting about anu possibly meaning atom. If you split the atom, you separate A from anu. No translators or scholars split anu, which is paradoxical, has a double meaning. But if you separate the a or treat it like a prefix, a is absence or negation. So we could think of nu by itself. Nu is not its own word because it is more like a particle in and of itself. So again, particle in terms of grammar, particle as in subatomic particle of the atom anu. Nu can mean something like indeed or the now, but it's also used to indicate an emphatic plea, like praying. So we could think of anu in this mystical sense as the absence of now, or what goes beyond even now, the subtlest unit of time, and the absence of prayer. The absence of prayer in the seeker's uh, journey comes at the end, because obviously they wouldn't be a seeker if they weren't praying or longing for something. So when pleading and even the very clutch of the present moment fall silent, a higher holding, graha, keeping that meaning of hold, the divine's gentle taking up on our behalf of what we released, then God really does it for us. A couple examples of this in nature, with it raining outside, you can notice mushrooms flushing after the rain, mycelium spread quietly underground, and then a sudden moisture pulse births a ring of caps right overnight. Or similarly, an apple stem gradually weakens after long growth of the apple and the tree, and all it takes is one untraceable breeze to detach the ripe fruit, but the fruit has to be ripe. So although its ripeness doesn't do it, it can't be done by gravity and wind without the apple having reached maturity. So that is the koan. You have to ripen, but your ripeness won't guarantee any particular moment when the grace will manifest. Or like autumn leaves changing colors when fall comes, chlorophyll withdraws and latent pigments ablaze, which is, it's a beautiful metaphor because the pigment is already there, but it's unmanifest. And autumn comes at the end, it's considered the final season before everything goes into winter, which is like the stillness of death or beyond life. So prayer is a raft. It's indispensable, sure, while crossing the river, but sort of like how they say, well, once you cross the river of life with enlightenment, you have to set down the raft. So you set down prayer gently on the farther shore. For the early and middle turns of sadhana, or spiritual seeking, questioning, inquiry, conscious petition of God, or devotional yearning, it does soften our heart, and it does refine our awareness and align the inner wind, so to speak, for the sailor. They keep the mind, though, circling the beloved like a devotee sometimes never merges with God, because they love the circling. They want the relationship. Yet the culmination of spiritual maturation is not an ever more eloquent plea. It's the silent consent to be held, to be carried. And at that threshold, the very gesture of asking presupposes distance, and distance is what must finally be sacrificed, what must finally dissolve. So for the ripe seeker, yes, the advice is paradoxical. Relinquish even the subtlest reaching within every atom of your being, and grace, which is already in there, reveals itself as the ground you stand on. The giving up prayer is not a rejection of one's devotion, but you can think of it as the consummation. Longing so complete, it implodes into union. You're calling your lover, you're pleading with your lover, you're luring the lover, you're courting the lover, but then there's nothing more to say once you're together. So petition is impossible because nothing remains outside of the saint's embrace. A couple other short reflections from other mystics in the Christian tradition before I conclude. Angelus Silesius, a 17th century mystic, wrote, God is a pure no thing, concealed in now and here. The less you reach for him, the more he will appear. And that's, very contradictory to classical theology, where God is so personified, either as the Son or as the Father. Only, when you go into the third part of the Trinity, the Spirit, can we fathom this statement of a pure no thing. So maybe also the Trinity represents stages of this grace, as in having a teacher like Jesus, having a creator like God, and having something that goes all beyond time and causality with the Spirit. Saint Theophan, the recluse of 19th century Russia, wrote, "It is not one's own efforts that lead to the goal, because without grace, efforts produce little." That echoes everything we've been talking about. Nor does grace without effort bring what is sought. That underscores the paradox of grace, or as a koan, grace acts in us and for us, but also in our efforts. So here I've tried to capture this in 5 phases of the journey. Number 1, intentional devotion, which is like disciplined prayer, formal prayers, confessions, sacraments, mantra, prostrations, whatever religion or tradition one has where there's a deity. 2, exhaustion of the strategy. The practitioner notices diminishing returns. I can totally relate to this, whereas like in the beginning of meditation, I felt like I was getting so much, and then I was so motivated. But after time, it's like when peace is no longer novel or calmness is no longer novel, you start sensing the fatigue of the practice. Longing ripens into something deeper, uh, more deeply receptive. Third is kenosis, which Christian mystics describe as the relaxation of reaching, or the opening of the hand from climbing or grasping or reaching out. 4 is synergy. Grace now starts to flow through the surrendered faculties of the aspirant, turning capacity into conductivity. This is what is meant by the conduit, or becoming an instrument of peace, as in St. Francis's prayer. And 5th is abidance. No doer is left, yet doing happens. Work and worship become indistinguishable. Jessica Powers was a 20th century mystic who became a Carmelite, American Carmelite nun. She has some writings known as Advent, and she wrote, "I shall be born of her by blessed grace. I wait in merry darkness, faith's walled place, with hope's expectance of nativity." So it's describing the birth of Christ, which is why it's called Advent. She wrote this after she entered the Carmelite order and became Sister Miriam of the Holy Spirit. But these 3 lines of the Advent, these 3 sentences, she compresses the entire contemplative itinerary that I was talking about. Mary darkness, and why Mary's so associated with grace, like in the Hail Mary, full of grace. Mary darkness means not the gloom of doubt, but the quiet uterine night in which the word first took flesh in the Christian mythology. For a Carmelite, darkness is the interior silence St. John of the Cross called noche oscura, a space where the senses are so stilled that the soul can be gestated by God. Faith's walled place here, faith is architectural, a cloistering, like for the sister, a cloistering enclosure that protects the mystery from premature exposure, like a womb. Powers or Saint Miriam suggests that the most radical act of faith is not saying another prayer, but letting the walls of receptivity hold, like graha, what is already moving within our atoms, within our cells. And thirdly, born of her by blessed grace, this is the climactic paradox. The soul that allowed itself to be carried now discovers that it is Mary who gives it birth. The disciple becomes the child. Grace, therefore, is not something Mary hands over. She's the matrix, Mary, the matrix through which grace gives the self back to itself transfigured. So in maturity, devotion to Mary, Mother Mary, is not, doesn't remain a petition to her, but identification with her, because she midwives the divine nature awakening inside the soul. So Catholic mystics often say that Mary is the shortest way, because her whole being is an act of pure availability, or emptiness, as in Buddhist mysticism. Emptiness here not being no thingness, but pure potentiality. To dwell in her atmosphere is to breathe the aura of effortless grace. Because the social plane, and I'll just conclude with this, on our social plane, the plane of people and relativity, because that's visible, and the mystical plane is interior and invisible, cultures rooted in patriarchy, religions all rooted in patriarchy, have repeatedly co-opted the surface sense of grace to police women's behavior, and why grace is associated with an expectation of women. In the Victorian and Edwardian etiquette manuals, it praised grace of manner in women, like soft speech, lowering your gaze, controlling your gait, while relegating bolder traits like assertiveness, public intellect, to the ungraceful. And why women who were bold were considered trouble. Christian domestic literature of the 1950s urged wives and daughters to grow in grace by joyful submission, citing the Virgin Mary, but ignoring the revolutionary edge of her magnificence. And just, cherry picking certain quotes, like he casts down the mighty. And thirdly, in many non-Western settings, you got local customs and terms equivalent to grace that become shorthand for feminine modesty, like reinforcing caste, class, clan honors, honor code, masculine codes, and so on. So this is kind of a kind of weaponization of grace, including a semantic slide where a notion like sola gratia in Christian mysticism in Latin, a notion that began as a vertical gift, God to humanity, slides into a horizontal demand, man to woman. There's the aesthetic moralism, like graceful body language is framed as moral virtue. Any departure, loud laughing, confident strides for women is all coded as moral defects and justifying social discipline, even cruelty, even punishment. And then the selective proof texting, like finding religious authorities who cite passages on what being full of grace could mean, while ignoring the prophecy of St. John of the Cross, or Paul's in Christ there is no male nor female. Because what's the gender of the soul? What's the gender of the Holy Spirit? It's not, right? It's beyond. So finally, in conclusion, reclaiming this deeper current of grace. I'm talking about grace from the perspective of the mystic. Grace precedes worthiness. The point of grace today is that it's not earned. Therefore, it can't be revoked for failing one of these pettiness tests. And grace decentralizes power. Mystically, receiving grace levels the playing field. It eliminates hierarchies. Any teaching that weaponizes the term to reinforce the hierarchy betrays its source. And contemporary feminist theologians and womanist writers speak of thick grace or dangerous memory to emphasize grace as the energy for liberation. And the beauty here to close this is liberation on all planes rather than compliance. So grace without cause. Thanks, everybody. And I'm sure many of you have a lot more experience with lesson 169. So look forward to hearing your reflections as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we're looking forward to the conversation. SpeakEasy is a non-for-profit virtual spiritual community, and we exist on the generosity of our community members. We thank you for playing your part and for taking the opportunity to make a donation for today's Daily Bread. Your generous donations help us to bring spiritual leaders, artists, and speakers to Sunday service and keep these important conversations going. As you were spiritually fed by today's conversation, I invite you to go within, see what is yours to share. No gift is too small. All your contributions are tax deductible here in the United States. You will find the link to the donation in the chat, or you can always go to our website, speakeasyspiritualcommunity.com, and at the top, just look for the tab that says Give. And I'm going to pass it to Sherry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Todd. It's always so enlightening. Now it's time for the truly unique experience of SpeakEasy Sunday service, our community conversation. This is where we invite you to speak easily, find your voice and your truth, share your thoughts, your inspirations, your awareness, and especially your questions with the community. When you feel called to share a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand, which is located in the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen. And note to keep your video on when doing so. We want to know and see you. And I'll get us started by, I had a couple of questions, but the first one I have for you, Todd, to get us started is grace a one-time gift or an opening to another state? I didn't get the sense of whether it was one time or you understand what I'm trying to say. Do I get grace and never have to look for it again, or just my question?
It's a good question, and I guess the answer is another paradox, which is it's one time and not one time, because we might have a first time glimpse into grace and believe it's there, but not be able to perceive it or live it. So it's always there, and yet it seems to happen in stages, including an initiatory spark and a final spark, and so maybe we can like locate ourselves in that sense, in that journey. Like, have we been touched by grace already? And many of us probably know, yeah, we've been touched by grace. We've been saved by grace, even at certain times of our life. And you might also notice that you felt the touch of grace when you were farthest from truth, or whatever felt like the way or alignment with source. um, but maybe it doesn't feel complete. So it's like you have faith, and so there's maybe more ripening to do to get our apple to fall from the tree of life, so to speak. So,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
That helps. I think what happened, well, I know what happened, is as you were describing it, you were describing my definition of enlightenment, which I consider to be a one-time thing, so, which could be wrong. So I understand. Jerome has his hand up. Welcome, Jerome.
Thank you. Thanks as always, Todd, for your really amazing talk. So as
Thank
you
you,
were
Jerome.
speaking, I had a couple of thoughts. The course says that spirit is in a state of grace forever. So grace is our natural birthright. It's just who we are, at least in my understanding. But what I was thinking about is something I've been thinking about recently, which is what I consider a collective crisis of faith. And it's not that we don't have faith. We have very, very powerful faith, but we have faith in status quo. And you mentioned that early in your talk where you're talking about our seemingly, this world we live in that is seemingly full of fear. And the Course speaks to us, beyond this world is a world I want, which is the world that we can have access to all of the time through grace, through our connection with spirit. But we are so, I just was even noticing in my own life how much I believe in that other world. My faith is so strong in chaos and competition and lack of resources and all of the things. But through your talk, I was such a reminder of like who we are at our core, which is this spirit is in a state of grace forever. So anyway, that was my thought.
Beautiful reflection, Jerome. And it reminds me of this book, Black Elk Speaks, about a Lakota medicine man during the last days of the fall of the Lakota Sioux to the U.S. military, and seeing their entire way of life collapse cruelly and viciously, and people, be totally cleansed of their ancestral lands, right, and killed or displaced to reservations. Still, he's describing throughout this book all of that fear, greed, domination is just a shadow of the real. And you used even similar language that there's a world beyond that, just beyond that, where everything makes sense. And he never really lost that sense. And connect this to, again, what like Sherry was asking, there's a parable about I think it's a lioness who's hunting sheep while pregnant and dies in the middle of the hunt, giving birth. And the sheep take the cub, and the cub grows up to believe it's a sheep until one day another lion is hunting them. And the little lion, like a young lion now, is running in fear from the attack of the lion, seeing only fear, greed, chaos, cruelty of nature, survival of the fittest. And all the while, the lion's shouting out to that cubs, which is now a young lion, saying, "You're not a sheep. You're not a sheep." Mm-hmm. It hears it, but it doesn't believe it. And then that lion grabs it by the scuff of the neck, and what can the young lion do but surrender, believing that it's in the grips of death. But the mature lion takes it to a pond to show its reflection to it. Mm. So in that moment, the truth is revealed, but nothing changed. Sort of like how Ramana Maharshi said, nothing happened. like, and in that story, nothing actually happens other than, yeah, this lion dragged me kicking and screaming. Realization came unbidden to that young lion, but when did it start becoming a lion? Not at that moment, right? So
Right.
so that's kind of the paradox of all this captured in that parable.
Great story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic story. Thank you, Todd. I have another question. Should we seek grace? I didn't get that sense either. Should we literally seek it?
I think we can seek to understand the grace that's already present in our life. So I think we can seek it by trying to inquire um, about its presence that's already there. And I mean, I think like in the moment of meditating or contemplation or deep prayer,
Mhm.
you feel it. So by seeking it, we get our senses sharpened. Even though you have to give up the seeking, because it's like you can't keep seeking your lover. You won't continue to seek your lover once you find your lover. Um, so the seeking helps us tune out what you're almost talking about, which is the cruel world, not abandon it, but see past it, not to be defined by it and not to superimpose a window of time on the totality of God. I think that gets us into depression and like sort of crystallizes our sense of pointlessness and meaninglessness and separation from beauty and truth and goodness. So yeah, I think we should seek it by trying to feel how it's already there and how it's already held us or saved us, where it already showed up in our life, what was happening then, what were some of its secrets whispering to us as we try to become an instrument. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. You answered it on a really different level for me. Don't seek it as if it's not something that is a gift or that is deserved. Don't seek it. Don't seek it as being unattached to you, but ask for awareness of it, or closer or more awareness of it, which is totally different because you're putting it as a part of you already that you're unaware of or I'm not in touch with.
I appreciate you highlighting that because that's one of, I think, the core aspects of grace, right? That it's unmerited, and even one's own attunement to it doesn't like doesn't change anything that was already true, and therefore it changes our perception towards the things Jerome was talking about, because what's true is still true regardless of uh, like waves on the surface, right? So it gives us the power to surrender and then also be an instrument on all those levels, because we're no longer taking what's happening on the surface to be the truth of the whole thing.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's clarity. I have one more question. Um, since you've looked at many religions, have you found there to be a sense of grace in all faiths?
Did you say a central grace?
A sense of grace.
Oh,
Have you found grace to be present, not in the word grace, of course, but present as a sense in all faiths that you've seen?
I think so. So far, it's described in different ways, like mercy of Allah in Islam, the Tao in China, uh, Anugraha or Krupa of Hinduism, uh, the three jewels of Buddhism, the Sangha, the Dharma, and the Buddha, means that by doing your Dharma and remaining associated with the fellowship, then the grace of awakened one will be revealed. And then, in Christian mythology, Mother Mary is the personification of grace and the conduit of God on earth. So I do think so. I do think that's a universal theme, an archetypal theme that there's grace in every tradition, even in traditions like Taoism, which kind of center nature, but nature is graceful. Nature happens on its time, not our time. Or as Emerson said, the secret of nature is patience, or without rushing, everything is accomplished. So, yeah, even in philosophy and like American transcendentalism, we see this with this concept. So that gives me a lot of inspiration, a lot of hope that however people were seeking in their own cultures and their own traditions in their own parts of the world in all different eras, something emerges akin to grace in all of them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the rest of the audience? I'll read from the chat. You stated, from Claudia, you stated grace collapses the illusion of guilt. Guilt is pretty powerful, and a lot of times we carry guilt our entire lives. Can you expand on your statement and how a person can get to that place where grace trumps guilt? Also, just want to add that Amazing Grace is one of my favorite songs. And Karen, I see your hand in just a moment.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about Amazing Grace. Yeah, that would be something for all of us to sing today. It's a beautiful question, Claudia, and an important one because guilt is so powerful. It is a spell. It starts with something that feels deeply out of alignment for a person. Otherwise, they wouldn't feel guilty, right? So that's the wisdom of guilt. Your sense of dissonance, anyone's sense of dissonance with guilt is also grace, because if somebody was moving waywardly or deeper into illusion, but didn't feel anything off about that, they would have deeper to go. The sense of guilt is a grace in the sense that it's the divine saying this doesn't work for you, and something's calling to you. When guilt crystallizes in the psyche as shame, a person is under a deep spell, which is the belief that because of this past wound or mistake, I have now defined myself as that, which is a mistake myself. So guilt is like, that was a mistake. Shame is, I am a mistake now, as in I'm permanently flawed or permanently broken. And then a person goes on self-sabotaging because of the deep-seated unworthiness. But grace undoes that unworthiness, because even when we were out of alignment, like the lion believing it was a sheep, it was never not a lion, right? So when grace starts to heal that, a person transcends the time where they made mistakes or the time when they were wrong, because the other side of guilt is resentment. Guilt and shame inward is like self-hatred, and outward is resentment towards others and the desire to punish them. Shame is the desire to punish ourselves. And so when grace comes and we shift into wisdom, we allow the wisdom to guide ourselves in the now, and we accept the pain or the wound as another version of grace, as in light was kind of streaming through our wound, but maybe I didn't accept it at the time. And so it's a process, just like any healing is a process. But if we can allow that process to unfold, it means ceasing something. So again, in anugraha, the absence of re-injuring ourselves, in the absence of re-injuring the broken leg, the cast, the cloister, the womb walls, allows the healing to take place organically and naturally. So this message is that you can trust, we can all trust that we'll be healed from our mistakes, but to try to recognize the ways that you're continuing to resurrect guilt, and thereby blocking the grace. Thank you.
Wonderful answer. Thank you. Kathy, was there Kathy who had her hand up? Okay, perhaps she changed her mind. Okay. Well, thank you, Todd. I want to thank everyone for being here and for staying with us through this wonderful conversation about grace. I learned a lot. I've got 4 pages of notes. So I will be taking it in even later. I want to thank you all for being here this week on another Sunday. We will see you all next week. Same time, same place. Have a blessed, blessed week. And this is signing off.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Todd. Always a joy to be here.
Thanks so much, Sherry. Appreciate you hosting us today. Have a great week.
Too.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Will.
Todd.
Thanks, Mari. Everybody. Hi,
Bye,
Justine,
Todd.
Dove.